Hey guys, welcome to the Soapy Box Podcast. Today we're talking about boundaries, but this is episode 2, so make sure to check out episode 1 before this because it gives context into what we're talking about. Thank you so much for checking us out. Make sure to hit like and subscribe on the way in and enjoy the show.
We're going to talk about what is a reasonable boundary, and I have probably a little reel that I did on this on what is reasonable, but I'll just start out with, I had a therapist ask me once because I was so frustrated. I was in the midst of it with a family member who was in crisis. And it's hard when you're new to boundaries and somebody's in crisis to know what is a reasonable boundary. Mm-hmm. And she said, "What's reasonable to you?" And I looked at her and like, just give me the answer. I paid you for this hour. But it really opened my eyes to
answer all the questions.
Yeah, just give me the answer. I don't have time for this. I have a decision to make. But it made me think about it later. I'm like, okay, what is reasonable to me? And that question played. I'm like, oh, it is important to know what's reasonable to me.
Yeah.
That's an important question because I matter. And
the question's a little deeper than you thought.
Yes.
Huh? Yeah.
And that I matter in the equation was new to me.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I matter. My needs matter. And this is important for Christians, especially because sometimes we got caught up in like not wanting to be selfish, but your needs matter to God. You need to be loved. You're supposed to love yourself and others. So these things are important. We have to know that what is reasonable to us does matter.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So understanding like your needs, right? Mm-hmm. And your wants when you're trying to figure out what a reasonable boundary is.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's a good first place to go to. Mm-hmm. After that, I'd probably determine whose lane is it in, right? Mm-hmm. So like, is the overgrown tree on my property or on theirs, right? And
whose responsibility?
Whose responsibility is it? What property is it on? I think like, for you and me, we like to take responsibility for other people's overgrown trees, right?
I do.
And, that's a compliant thing, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a good place to go to next is like after needs versus wants. Like, is this a need versus want? What are my needs? What's reasonable to me? Whose lane is it now? And then after that,
it's respecting the wants and needs of others.
Yes.
So I feel like it's easy to, when you're putting up a boundary, to I think it's really easy to get combative about it and turn it into an argument because especially if you're new to it and you're not really too familiar with like how to put in those boundaries, it could easily come off as way harsher than it should be. So usually for me, what I love doing in situations like this, and this has helped me even with, not even putting up a boundary, but like trying to solve something in a relationship, is I always put myself in their shoes. And I imagine, I'm like, okay, what if he or she was telling me what I want to tell them right now? How would I feel? Would I take it right? Would I be understanding, or would I just close off and, escalate the situation?
Is it reasonable?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think because boundaries have been difficult for me, and I'm much older than you guys, so I've had much more years of not saying no. When it is a big ask, it's like I listen to my body for an indicator, right? Mm-hmm. I do that a lot. And if I'm feeling good, to decide if it's a reasonable boundary, I think, is it a need versus a want? Okay. Does this person truly need this? And does this person, is this a want? And that helps me kind of determine if it's
my needs and wants first, whose lane is it, and what's their needs and wants.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Because sometimes, even if it's a want for them, I'm okay like giving somebody a want if my basic needs are met.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm okay giving if it's, a want that I can give and that it's okay to give.
But I'm not going to be just like petty and not give it to you because it's just a want.
Right.
And all my needs are met, or all my needs are met, but I don't really feel like all my needs are met, or, it's just learning like these different things. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So to find a reasonable boundary too, I also pray.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't know what God's doing.
Yeah.
Like we don't know I feel led sometimes to not do things that I feel would be the right thing to do. And you get to see the fruit of that later, that, okay, you're right, I wasn't supposed to step in there.
Yeah.
And that's been nice. And I think that the key to the boundaries, to me, to helping me set boundaries and wanting to, is to knowing how much we actually hurt people by stepping in and taking their responsibility, and they don't get to learn and grow. Like, it's been key to me that I've hurt people, like really hurt them by keeping them in a situation, by enabling them. Yeah. And I don't want to hurt people. I mean, the whole part of being a compliant is you're a nice person, right? Supposedly, just joking. So let's say I overstep a boundary with you guys. How do you guys communicate?
Short, sweet, and simple. Like for the first time, for sure. No is enough. No is a full sentence. Use it. And if you can, like stay in a neutral and kind voice. Like you don't have to be like super ultra gentle. You don't have to be like, hey, here's my boundary, mother. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, just kind of like short, sweet, simple, kind, like in this voice, in this tone,
I think a simple no is sufficient.
You could say, no, I don't want to. No, I'm not feeling like it today.
No.
And I feel like in situations when you're in a group of people and let's say someone shares something about you that you didn't necessarily want it to be shared, I think it's good to not necessarily call them out in front of people, but like just find the right time and place to really place that boundary and say, hey, I don't like my things being shared to everybody,
Time and place.
Yeah, like making sure that it's just a safe space on both ends.
Absolutely.
When I'm communicating a boundary, I like to be as direct as possible now and clear and kind, right? But I used to believe that being direct was mean. Right?
Yeah, me too.
But I think being direct is a kindness to both of them. And saying no no, I don't want to do that, is saying yes to a relationship, right? Saying no to you is saying yes to the relationship. It means I'm not just going to walk away with this. I'm not going to just avoid you. I'm trying to communicate boundaries to you. And it lets people know where I stand and where they stand. And I think about when people have given boundaries to me, I'm like, I like that. Like there's a freedom in it. Yeah. And also when we express and effectively communicate a boundary to somebody, it gives them permission to do the same with us. And then we can build a healthier relationship together.
Facts. I completely agree. I think like also a good point is like assuming they have the best interest, like for you, you know what I mean? Because when you just learn boundaries and somebody crosses a boundary, your immediate reaction is to be like, screw you, dog. I'm going to teach you a lesson instead of like assuming that, they might have just like not known that that was your boundary or, like they want you to have boundaries. You know what I mean? So just like assume that they have like the best, interest for you.
When I'm communicating a boundary, I of course try to be kind and gentle and posture it with that kindness. And especially if somebody is new to me, the new me, but knows, you know what I mean? But knows me from before, I'm a little kinder with it. Or sometimes, for example, I'll say, hey, I used to really be like this in the past, but I'm trying to change the way I am. So I'm not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I kind of couch it a little bit with, I'm learning and I'm growing and this is where I'm at. Could you please have compassion with me is basically what that's saying.
So it's like clear. Yeah.
It's clear, but I'm softening it up for them.
Yeah. So when I say like neutral to kind voice, it would be a good opportunity to have a kind voice, right?
Yes. But also instead of just saying, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I can say, hey, I used to say yes to everything and it just overtook my life. So I'm just trying to communicate my boundaries more effectively.
Well, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Yes.
If you're
you're uncomfortable.
Yeah, if you're uncomfortable and you're like, or even new to setting boundaries, like that's a great one.
Yes. It's just those easier ways.
Yeah.
And then it takes some pressure off of you and them, I think.
Yeah. You can kind of posture and prime it how you want, you know?
And I think it's just a gentler, easier way when you're first starting out to do it. Or, why is it so hard to enforce a boundary?
Dude.
Why?
Say that again.
Why is it so hard to enforce a boundary?
That's what I'm talking about. I think because, fear is the root of struggling to set boundaries, right? Like that's where most, if you're avoidant or compliant, that's where it kind of starts, Yeah. And that fear is often placed in different things like, like I've said, losing relationship, conflict, hurting feelings. When I started to learn boundaries, like I could set a boundary, but when someone would like continue to break that boundary, I couldn't like enforce it. Like I couldn't I didn't want to hurt their feelings. I didn't want them to feel awkward. I didn't want the situation to just like
you
get
felt
ruined
like your power
because,
was taken away.
Yeah, exactly. And the vibe was fun, maybe, you know what I mean? Or I was having a good time and I just didn't want to just ruin it, Yeah. And it was just more like a fear of conflict and like hurting others that just, made me struggle enforcing them.
Do you have a hard time enforcing boundaries?
I do. I think it's with certain people. I think with friendships, I have a very easy time now. It's still like trying to navigate that with family, but that's where the fear roots,
Yeah.
If you're just scared of losing relationships.
And also I think with family too, there's definite patterns and dynamics that have been built up that it just takes a little more time and practice, I think.
Yeah.
I think I feel was hard for me when I was first starting to set boundaries there was this internal programming in me that said, you're selfish if you don't do this. You're not kind. You're not. And if you're a Christian too, let's add that component on.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be kind. You're supposed to be selfless, right? Yeah. But if you don't understand what those words actually mean, it's a little confusing, right? Selfless doesn't mean that, of course, you put others before yourself, but only after they have taken care of their own responsibilities of which they're able to take care of. We're each told to carry our own load. And so we weren't told to carry everybody else's load.
Yeah.
But we are, of course, in the Good Samaritan in the Bible, right? Yeah. He stopped and he took care of the Good Samaritan, but he didn't end his life and quit his job to help the guy.
Yeah.
Right?
He didn't.
He put appropriate boundaries.
Self-sacrifice everything in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So selfless doesn't mean self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that was a difficult thing for me was that programming of what that looked like. Yeah. And we could do a whole podcast on just, the Christian biblical way to set a boundary and why it's okay. Yeah. But the truth is Jesus is about love. Jesus is about personal responsibility. Jesus is about freedom. Being somebody else's caretaker isn't freedom.
Mm-hmm. There's like a social conditioning, right? So like in the church or maybe like at the restaurant I was working at on, you know what I mean? Where like everybody be nice to each other and everything's all good and okay. I'm not saying that the restaurant was, guilty of that, but just an example, like there's an expectation. An expectation, yeah. And it looks a certain way and you participate in that certain way because that's all you think it is.
Well, and the church is very similar, right?
Yeah,
there's an expectation. Exactly. We help, we do all these things, but we're also this is another thing I want you to be aware of when you're setting a boundary or when you're choosing to do something for somebody. If you're not doing it with a cheerful heart, you're being a compliant.
Yep.
And you're going to end up being resentful for it.
I love that. Cheerful heart.
Do it if you
got to do it cheerful heart.
Yes. So that's something like that I look at when I'm like, do I want to do this? Is my heart cheerful about this? Because that's how God wants us to approach him and his brothers and his sisters. Like, if not, it's just a dirty rag anyway.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. If it isn't, yep.
Yep. Then we're just doing it to look good.
Exactly.
And that's not what God wants. He wants us to help and love with a cheerful heart. I know I said that like 4 times, but it is important.
With Christ centered in the middle.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's important when you're enforcing a boundary, especially if you feel like you still have anger towards it. You need to just take a break and let it soak before it
truth right
damages, everything that you built with that person.
Yes. Yes. And I think it's okay to take time to think about it and say, hey, if it's a big
That's
if it's a big ask,
right?
I need to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, I just had somebody ask me recently who wanted me to, it was a big ask and I knew it. I didn't want to do it. And so I gave myself some time to think about it because sometimes I go right to the no now. And I'm like, I need to think about this. I need to talk to my husband about this.
You and I do that with Soapy Box.
Yes.
I'm quick to say no. You're quick to say no sometimes. And I think you and I catch it now. You know, I'm like, we just said no. Like, you know what? You might be right there.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, my bad for saying no so fast.
Yeah, it's okay to take time.
Yeah.
And I think that's an effective way to enforce a boundary too.
Yeah, you have to be respectful of people that want to take time too. What's nice about when me and Tyler argue, I feel like we don't argue often, but I think we're pretty good about, you know, either of us can look at each other and be like, I don't want to talk about this right now. Let's go take like a breather for 20 minutes and let's come back and retouch on it, you know? And even when I'm stubborn and I'm like, why would you even want to stop talking about this now? I still respect it because I know there's a root of like, you know, he's trying to protect the relationship.
Yeah. Right.
And that's important with boundaries too.
And I think taking a time out is another way of saying yes to the relationship because it's not saying I'm leaving. It's saying I need some time to think this through.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool that we can kind of like read it off each other without having to say it. But if you're new to doing that in a relationship, setting boundaries in a relationship, you're going to probably have to vocalize that. You know, I need a moment. I need to go for a walk before I do something or say something that I don't mean out of anger or emotions, right?
Yes, exactly. And especially if you're new to setting boundaries, there's a lot of emotions happening anyway.
Yeah. There's a emotional tipping point that led you here. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and we kind of already talked about the other reasons it's hard to enforce a boundary. Fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nicole
that was
got some
a big
FOMO.
one for me. Yeah. I mean, it was especially when I was younger. I think that's something that you can experience throughout your whole life, though.
Yeah. I've felt that a lot in like high school, like graduating or like high school and stuff. Like that
for me,
period
it was
of time
so bad.
where your identity is loose a little bit and you're like trying to figure out where you are in the world.
Someone doesn't invite you to
like
something, it's over with.
Oh, man.
What did I do wrong? Well, maybe they just want to hang out with some other people, you know?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And that's a boundary, right? They get to hang out with other people. You get to say no. It's a dance, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to it's like breathing, right?
Yes.
Flow. It's not supposed to be like holding your breath for a certain thing or like trying to extend your breath too long, you know? It's supposed to be simple breath, man. It's supposed to be a flow.
I know this person who has a difficulty when they're doing something and not everyone's invited. Like it's truly difficult for this person. And I'm just like, it's okay. Like not everyone gets invited.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's hard to not be invited though, a little bit but that's where's your identity lie when you don't get invited? You know what I mean?
You start looking into every aspect. Like, did I just say something wrong? Am I weird? You know, everything you can think of.
And when you get to be my age, you'll be grateful when you don't get invited.
Starting to feel that way.
I'm starting to feel that way too.
Yeah.
Honestly.
You'll be like, I don't have to do that. That's awesome.
Just trying to stay inside and watch some reality TV with Nicole, man. Play some guitar, kind of good.
Oh, that's all we do.
So we've talked about why it is so hard for some of us to enforce a boundary. Now let's discuss how do you actually enforce a boundary when you have a boundary buster who won't pay attention to your boundary?
I think a really important thing, like I said earlier, is to put yourself in their shoes and make sure you have a kind heart about it.
Yeah.
Oh, because it's easy when somebody crosses your boundary to get a little heated. For me, it is because I'm still maybe in phase 2 of this where I don't like my boundaries being crossed.
Yeah. Yeah. So step 1, set the boundary, good heart, their perspective.
Yep.
After that, you know, when you're enforcing the boundary, repeat it 2, 3, 10 times. You know, if you feel like you have to go to 10 times, that's up to you. That's a lot of energy, but that's
At
up
that
to
point,
you, right?
you should just walk away.
Yeah.
At that point, you should walk away. Yeah.
I'm a three time person. My new favorite thing is to say the exact same words. No, I don't want to go to that concert. No, I don't want to go to that concert. You sure? It'll be really fun. No,
That
I don't want to
clearness.
go to that concert. And I think it sets, like, I'm being nice, but it also says, hey, you're not listening to me. I've told you 3 times.
So
right?
yeah, it's like, give them the benefit of the doubt that they maybe didn't hear it.
That's the second and third time.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The second time, I believe in second chances. You know, second time, be clear. Let them know exactly what exactly I'm saying, the words in general. I think there's this phrase that you mentioned earlier, saying no is me saying yes to the relationship. I think you could throw that one in there. You know what I mean? If you're struggling to set a boundary and they keep busting it down.
If you, I feel like when I have a person who is not listening to me, I'm okay getting a little more assertive. I am, because I feel like you are ignoring me and my needs at this point. I'm going to get a little more assertive and help you hear me.
Yep.
Okay. And if I get a little more assertive by the 3rd or 4th time, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys could do you.
Yeah.
But I like to think of this next stage when people don't listen the 2nd, 3rd time as punishment. Just joking. This is not therapist approved.
Consequences.
Consequences is such a nice word, but I think by the time I'm at the 4th time of somebody saying no, like continually trying to break my boundary, I think it's fair for me to be a little irritated.
Yeah.
So here's my consequences. It's space,
Discipline.
time, and well, yes, that's sweet. It's time and distance, right? Okay, so you don't listen to me. You're not caring for my needs. I have to give us time and distance or I'm going to lose my marbles. And I think that's fair because, you know, and this happened with your dad early on. If he wouldn't let me work, because, you know, when he's not busy, right? He thinks I should not be busy, but we have 2 different work schedules. So he'd come in and interrupt me. So I said, okay, if you cannot obey this boundary I'm setting, I'm going to go work at the coffee shop. Well, he didn't want me to do that. So then he would start listening. So I gave him a consequence that was fair, right? It wasn't an arbitrary, I wasn't going to say, I'm going to divorce you if you don't let me work, right? It was, I'm going to go work at the coffee shop because this works better for me. And so I gave a consequence of what could happen. I never had to do it, right? Because then he saw, okay, you're really frustrated. I get it. But some boundary busters don't listen. And I have 2 in my life where I have to say, I have to go now. You're not hearing me. I love you. I will talk to you when you can speak nice to me.
Yeah.
Right? This is how we're going to have to do it. And I think there's a tricky thing when we're enforcing a boundary that we want to take control of the situation. So for example, I had a person hang up on me. So my initial response is a family member and who wanted something that I wasn't giving him. And he's not used to this yet. And so he hung up on me and then called me right back because he wants the thing, right? And my first thought is to say, he can't hang up on me. Well, that's just me trying to control him now, right? He gets to hang up on me if he wants. But here's the consequence. You can hang up on me if you want, but I don't have to pick up the phone next time.
Yeah.
This is the new consequence.
You're allowing them to have free will.
You get to have bad behavior. I don't have to put up with it. Meaning I'm going to give you time and distance because I need to take care of me too. And I think we should have maybe talked about this too in reasonable boundaries. It's reasonable to want to be safe emotionally, financially, and physically.
Yeah.
It's reasonable to be safe, to feel safe in your environment, right? And it's reasonable to have your needs taken care of first. There's a lot of reasonable things that we should have added maybe to that area. But being safe and being treated with respect and I'm respectful to people for the most part. I mean, I've had a few harebrained times in my life where I just wasn't.
Yeah.
But I deserve to be respected just as I would give to anybody else. Yeah. Right. And so when somebody treats me with less respect, I don't have to do that.
Yeah. So kind of like state the consequence. If they don't follow, give the consequence. And
Be
don't
kind
try to
about it.
control the outcome.
Exactly. And space and time. So I repeat the boundary. If it doesn't work, it's space and time. And the space and time is for them because I might get angry now and I don't, I don't want to go there. I don't want to dissolve the relationship. The space and time is for them as much as it is for me.
It's interesting, like consequences as they apply to different roles. So like say you have kids, you know what I mean? Like for us, when we're going to have kids, like space and time out.
Yes.
In their own space. Yep. You know what I mean? It's not that you're abandoning or neglecting them, but you are setting disciplinary action.
Yeah. Space and time from activities, space and time from games.
That's why I kind of like discipline more than consequences, because there's kind of like
I like punishment.
I know you do.
I'm just joking. The Punisher.
Yeah.
I'm totally joking.
Yeah. But I like discipline because it is kind of like you're disciplining the relationship. Even
that's from the root word disciple, which means to teach, right? So we're just teaching. We're teaching people how to treat you. And it's a re-education for many people in your life.
Yeah.
Because I'm not the same person. And so I do give a lot of latitude, but there's a couple people that are particularly hard for me.
Yeah.
And I don't have as much patience for them as I used to, but I don't want them out of my life either. So it's a difficult thing. So what are some common mistakes for boundary newbies? I kind of talked about taking control a little bit. That was a mistake that I used to make because I wanted such control of my life that I didn't want anyone to have control of me anymore. But now the space and time thing really works well for me. So I think that that's been helpful. And I think another thing that I did that was a mistake, or maybe it wasn't a mistake, is I think it would have been a mistake to stay there, is I retreated from life and people.
Yeah.
And I retreated because I needed to get strong, but I wanted to stay there would have been the mistake. Because I did. It was safe. I was like, I don't have to do boundaries all the time. I can just relax.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that would have been a mistake. But because we're meant for fellowship, we're meant for connection, we're meant to share and learn and grow. And that would have been a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think a common mistake for me was thinking I was too harsh. I thought every boundary I was putting down was too harsh because I wasn't putting boundaries down at all. So it felt like it was like way too much and it was going to just be like fracture the relationship. And it was more like just me sticking up for myself. You know what I mean?
And it was probably normal to everyone else. So your dad said this to me because I had a really hard time with this too in the beginning. He said, just be as mean as you want. Like say the worst thing you could, just practice on me. And I said, he goes, see, and it still wasn't harsh.
Yeah. And I think when you're learning, like you'll want to dance around it and be super nice about it.
Yes.
And then maybe you'll go the other way because you got angry about it. And I think over time, like repetition and practicing your boundaries will kind of give you a sweeter spot and more confidence and
giving yourself grace.
And giving yourself grace. Yeah.
I think so too, because it's a process and a journey. It took us a long time to get here. Well, some of us longer. You guys are younger.
Sugarcoating your boundaries. So this is kind of interesting because, you like to posture and prime your boundary for the person to hear it well, especially like depending on the circumstance, if they're like a new person that you're setting boundaries down with. However, I feel like sometimes if you sugarcoat the boundary, it might confuse the boundary buster and make them think that they can overcome that boundary. You know what I mean?
Okay. So I didn't like it when you first said it, but I do like what you said there at the end because I think if it's too soft, it looks like a way in for a controller.
Yeah.
Or a manipulator. Yeah. Or it's just another
it looks
objection.
like you don't actually mean no because you're just trying to be polite maybe. You know, it might look like that.
Looks like more of an objection than a no.
Yeah, exactly. Not setting a consequence I'll follow through with. Ouch, there was, like learning how to set boundaries. It's really hard to learn how to enforce them, right? And set a real consequence, but stick to one that like I actually could do, right? So like setting a boundary with space and time and maybe like for like a week, I'm just not going to see this person or talk to this person because it was crossing a line. Could I actually do a week? Was I able to do a week and enforce a week? I might, like there was times where I couldn't have, right?
I can't even think of a situation where I'd say, hey, I need a week break from you.
Yeah. Well, maybe you wouldn't set that word by word, but you to yourself were setting the boundary of, I just need a week,
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah. And like a lot of the times I would just like not follow through with it and give it up because maybe they just boundary busted. Maybe like I couldn't enforce it properly, or myself, I set too strict of a boundary. Right. It's just interesting things.
I think the punishment needs to fit the crime.
Yeah.
And you can't set these crazy ultimatums on a small boundary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you want to at first because you're like, I'm not putting up with this any longer.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're learning boundaries, you just get so fed up so quick. You have a short fuse, you know, and that pent up resentment is not an excuse for extreme punishment.
No, it won't work for you or for them, although it feels good in a minute.
Like if you set a boundary not to cheat, it would make sense that the following consequences of cheating would be like, I'm going to leave you. But if you left the toilet seat up, it's not, I'm going to leave you for that,
Well, I don't know. If they put the toilet paper on the wrong way, that's just maniacal.
Egregious bastards.
I know. I don't know why people put on under. It's weird.
But another thing that I also said earlier that's important is not giving yourself grace too. I think that's something that's really, really important in this situation. Just because I think, especially if you feel like you're a people pleaser, you're going to instantly resort to, trying to coddle people just because you put some self-respect in, and you really have to just learn that,
and you might relapse or make a misstep, and you have to give yourself grace for those things, because you're not a failure, you're learning, you're growing, right? And sometimes it's harder than others. Some people are harder than others. I think you just really have to, the grace thing is new to me on this issue.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I get in a loop with somebody and I'm like, why can't we figure this out? Like, why can't we do this? And then I think, am I ever going to get it?
Yeah. And especially as a people pleaser, I feel like a lot of people have a habit of phasing their boundaries as a question instead of a statement. And
to soften it up, like you said.
Yeah,
it's kind of like sugarcoating. Yeah, but question is a little different, though.
The question: do I really want to? Even an inflection, right? No, should we?
I think that you shouldn't do that. Do you agree?
No, I don't. I want your money.
Yeah,
and then it's shut down, and then you feel bad, and then you just can't do that.
That's awesome. I think it's really important. I think this goes along with the grace, is to celebrate the victories. So I have a person in my life who is in crisis, and it is very hard to say no to this person. And there's a hard one that just came out recently that I had to say no for so many reasons. I just knew it would hurt him. I knew that's what God wanted, and I did it. And it was something I could have never have done before. And so I am celebrating that victory, because this is like my biggest boundary buster. And I did it. And you have to celebrate that and remember, and this is like in our self-image, we talked about the success mechanism and these things and gaining success. Victories and successes will help you get to the next success. Because you're like, I did that before, I can do it again.
Yeah. I like that.
Yes. Any other tips for us?
Well, I got some tips for you. That sounded weird.
Well, while you think about it, I do want to mention this too before I forget, is a support person group is necessary.
Yeah.
Like, can you guys imagine, like, we all talk about boundaries a lot because we're living it, right? And we have a couple of people in our lives that we have to talk about.
Yeah.
Because I think boundaries are important for all of us, and being in that same place, because I want a long relationship with you guys.
Yeah.
But some people don't have anyone. Yeah. Some people don't have my husband who is willing to role play with me, who is willing to let me practice with.
That's pretty cool, man.
He's so awesome. Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you. And, I have a support group at church. Like, I have people that I can talk to at church. If there are support groups out there, I think if you are a huge people pleaser, maybe, I don't like to put labels on things, but because I'm not a codependent, but I have exhibited codependent issues. I'm not going to claim it because I am not that person, but in the past I might have been. But there are groups that you can go to get a little bit of support, but just don't live there. Don't live under the label.
Yeah.
I think when we live under a label,
part of your identity.
Yep. We don't need to identify as such things. We are growers. We are overcomers.
Yeah.
But there are some benefits to being in a support group. And I really would support a Christian group because that speaks truth and speaks about healing. And that's what God created us for, is fellowship. And I think it's important.
I agree.
Any other tips you guys have?
Yes, I got quite a list for you. First one, pay attention to your body. It might be giving you a sign that there's a boundary problem. A lot of these boundary problems, when they arise, you know what I mean? It's kind of like the failure mechanism thing that we mentioned earlier. Be more assertive in your boundaries so you can be less resentful in your relationships.
That's good.
Get in there.
I like that. Be assertive in your boundaries.
So there's less resentment. And that's, for them compliant fellas out there. People can't read your mind. Stop getting resentful with people who don't understand your needs because you can't communicate with them. That was my biggest struggle.
That is actually a struggle for me too, because I still get frustrated at the boundary buster for daring to step over a boundary with me when this was the relationship we had, and it's not fair. They didn't know. They don't know I changed.
The relationship that you enabled, know? Conflict avoidance is intimacy avoidance.
That's good.
That's a good one, huh? If you're constantly venting about someone, you probably need to set a boundary with them. I mentioned that one earlier.
Amen.
Unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional acceptance of bad behavior.
This is truth. And I think love is such a tricky thing, right? Mm-hmm. Love does not mean enabling.
Or self-sacrificing.
Love does not mean accepting a lie. Love does not mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
But what it does mean is being kind, compassionate. And being compassionate also doesn't mean self-sacrificing.
Yeah. It doesn't mean saying yes to everything,
Doesn't mean you got to put up with somebody's bad behavior.
Yes.
Allow it to happen.
No.
And then
because
unconditionally accept it.
We don't let people grow. That's the opposite of love.
Yeah.
If you're protecting somebody's feelings, if you're protecting somebody's from taking responsibility, that's the opposite of love.
Well, look at it. Like if you're trying to protect somebody's feelings, there's a chance that you're afraid of how you're going to feel dealing with somebody's feelings, right?
Right. And then they don't ever have to deal with their feelings.
Yep.
They don't have to grow.
Uncomfortable conversations are difficult. Not having them are harder. Or is harder.
Oh, and then so much builds up if you don't.
I wish you wouldn't have said that. I'm in the middle of waiting for one of those.
Yep. The silent treatment is not a boundary.
Okay, so I was confused by this because I want to say sometimes I need to be quiet, right?
Yeah.
I need some time. I need some space.
But I think there's communication that comes with that.
So there's like a practical, like in the moment, like withholding yourself. That becomes unfair.
Okay.
Withholding your love. That's kind of like the non-responsive, like not.
Okay. I probably do that. I probably do that.
Yeah. I do that a little bit too. I think we all do probably.
I do it too. I do.
It's not your job to be someone that puts other people at ease.
Oh my goodness. I walk into a room or do something and I want everyone to be comfortable.
That's how I am too.
Because then I'm uncomfortable if they're uncomfortable.
I know.
But it's not my job.
But it's
not my job.
It is your job to learn to be comfortable in yourself in those moments, right?
That's good. That was a good one.
Yeah,
that's a banger.
Thanks.
That's learning how to get comfortable with people doing things for you too.
Yes.
Because I feel like when you're compliant in that sense, you do things for everybody and you try to make everything perfect. But the second people want to do something for you, it just doesn't feel right.
I am getting
Like,
really
let's say it's
comfortable
like-
with you cooking for me. I'm getting really comfortable with it.
It is kind of a pride thing though,
At least
isn't
I
it?
like it. I don't know if it's a pride thing because it's like, okay, I put myself in my shoes. I
It can be.
always planned out my own birthdays. Like I always liked making them like super special to me. And then in the years that, you know, either someone made a reservation for me or I didn't have to focus on making it perfect for everybody, it just felt wrong for me, which that's not how it should be. You know, like I should accept those type of favors from people
Yeah.
to a certain extent.
I think sometimes as I've grown older, I don't want people to do things for me because I don't want to have to do things for them because I was so overwhelmed. I'm like, I'm already tapped out. If you do something for me, I'm gonna have to do something for you too.
I'm gonna owe you.
Yes,
Yeah.
because like it's a gift, right? It should be a gift. If we're going to give our time or energy to somebody, it should be a gift and it shouldn't be expected back, right? But in relationships, there's some kind of reciprocity that's to be expected.
Yeah.
And if there's a one-way relationship, I don't like that for me. I don't want to give that to somebody else.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, oh, please don't do anything for me. I'm so tapped out.
I agree.
But I think I'm growing back into that now that I have more time that I
get
can
that. I
can
get
be
that.
kind again. I can accept it.
The last one I have is be yourself so people looking for you can find you.
Yourself so people looking for you can
You know what I
your
mean?
people. Yes. I do have a new brand of people that I like to be around that accept me for who I am.
I like
Who you
that.
actually are, not
Yes.
the person that's trying to please everybody
Yes.
and
Pleasing.
sacrifice yourself because you're not being yourself.
Yes.
Right?
I like
love that.
I think that's a good one to end on.
That is a great one to end on. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please like and subscribe. It helps us. It helps us bring you content, and we enjoy doing this. Thank you, and see you next time.
See you. Thank you.